Welcome to the Conscious Pivot Podcast with international speaker, business mentor, best-selling author of Pivot, and your host, Adam Markel. The Conscious Pivot shares the stories and wisdom of people who have successfully reinvented some area of their business and personal life. You'll gain powerful insights into how you can fully embrace new opportunities, increase your performance, and master the art and science of innovation and resilience. So please join Adam as he guides you on your conscious pivot.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Markel, and I am just so happy. I don't use that word that often, but I feel just happiness inside of me at this moment. That's a good thing. I don't have anything against happiness. I just question sometimes whether it's a concept that is actually tangible and attainable. And so sometimes I replace happy with joy, joyful, or grateful, or things like that just feel tangible to me. But in this moment, happy is what came up. So that's what came out of my mouth. I do feel happy, probably in part because we are, my wife and I, celebrating the 1 month, just about a month ago, that we became grandparents, which is shocking to even just sort of say it, feel it. that she is a Gigi and I am a Poppy. And I don't know how that's possible since I was 18 years old, like 10 seconds ago. Okay. So anybody that can't relate, someday, hopefully you will be able to relate, because it is such a blessing. And those of you who can relate, yeah, well, I'm getting welcome to the club, I guess. I'm really also quite happy about the fact that I have a wonderful guest on the show today. I have for so long been really concerned about our servicemen and women, and concerned in the sense that the statistics about suicide in the military and people that have exited the military and gone back into civilian life, certainly issues that just flow out of this enormous service, this sacrifice that servicemen and women make for the greater benefit of all of us. Certainly, as I speak, I'm speaking about the U.S. Military servicemen and women, but there's servicemen and women in pretty much every country around the globe. And so, not putting any politics in the conversation at all, people that are committed to that service really deserve as much honor as we could ever imagine. And I don't think we can ever sort of go too far with that. I really don't. And what is heartbreaking is that after that service is completed or in transition into life outside of service, there are some difficulties. And I don't know that those difficulties, have been addressed as like so many things in life. There's just ways we can improve it and make it better. And that's what I so look forward to talking to my guest today is Captain Daniel Lim. He is an officer in the United States Marine Corps, graduated from the United States Naval Academy, and has served in his capacity as a company commander, leading the largest and most diverse company in the organization, and as a communications officer, engineering IT projects and establishing a command and control architecture for multiple levels of the organization. And during off-business hours, Daniel is devoted to serving the local community and educational departments. It's just such a great pleasure to have you with us today, Daniel. Thanks so much for being here. Now, can I ask you, do you prefer Daniel or Captain Lim?
Oh, Daniel, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yes, please.
Thanks
for having me, Adam. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. And you talked about happiness. I'm happy to be alive and to be living in the moment and to be on a podcast to share some of my experiences and hopefully impact the audience in a positive ways.
Yeah, I think that's already settled. as soon as you said what you did, I just found myself feeling your heart. And I think that's in leadership. Well, let me ask this question instead of make a statement out of it. How important do you think in leadership and in the leadership roles that you've been in and the ones that you've witnessed, how important is it that the leader has a heart, that they are, engaging their heart that you can feel their heart as part of that leadership role.
Yeah, 100%. I think leadership, a lot of people have a misconception that leadership comes from officership, but leadership comes from every level of organization and every level of rank within the Marine Corps. So it could be a brand new Marine checking into the unit to the most senior ranking Marine officer in the Marine Corps. I think leadership is personified and embodied throughout our transformational experience. So it's very important.
Yeah. And I think people think that if they do show their heart or they express themselves in a heart-centered way, that it somehow feels like weakness or vulnerability, and that doesn't kind of match up to the role. Do you feel like that's the case sometimes?
Yeah, I think the Marine Corps in general is an elite warfighting organization, and we take a lot of pride in what we do. And sometimes in organizations, seeking help can be construed or misconstrued as a sign of weakness, but we try to terminate that and eliminate that culture. And one of my favorite quotes is, "The culture of an organization is defined by the collective behavior of its leaders," right? It's how we behave, it's how we act, it's how we interact with one another, and care for one another that defines the culture. And I think that's what we are striving for in my organization.
That's interesting. So the culture is defined, I want to rephrase or paraphrase this back, see if I got it, that the culture of an organization is defined by the collective behavior of its leaders.
Correct.
I get that right?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so the experience of those that are following those leaders, I think what you're saying is that those leaders are models in many ways, that their behavior is what is the model for what's being required or the standards that are expected. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I realized at a personal level is behind every mission accomplishment and each lionized leader were subordinates who worked tirelessly and risked lives to see the collective vision come to life. And I think I made it my mission to care for the welfare of those Marines and sailors. And it's not just me, but it's leaders throughout the organizations who's making the positive impact for those around them. Not only sustaining their transformation development, but also returning quality citizens, I think imbued with the highest ideals of our institutional core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And that commitment is not only to the institution, but also to ourselves and to the mission, and to serve something bigger than ourselves. So I think it's ubiquitous. I think that spirit is ubiquitous throughout the organization that I serve in.
Yes. It's interesting because the word permission sort of comes up for me. This idea of, do you have permission to be real, to be transparent about actually what's going on? And I'm not looking to sort of find the first domino, although I'll admit I'm very curious about how it is that, when you see so many people as a percentage coming out of military service that have ongoing challenges and more than just the physical things that sometimes people get hurt. We're talking about military service, and there's wars and there are conflicts all over the globe that our servicemen and women are sent to go and you make a positive difference in some place. So yeah, there's physical injuries that come into play, but there's also sort of emotional and mental challenges that are attendant to that service as well. So my question is really one of, if the leaders are the ones setting the culture by their own behavior, do you see that leaders at the highest ranks are themselves transparent about their challenges in dealing with what they've seen and what they've experienced? Is that more becoming the trend in the Marine Corps or elsewhere, do you think?
I think, Adam, I could only speak on my personal experience, and as a military officer, I have developed a lasting bond with Marines, sailors, and their supportive families who are, dedicated to the causes bigger than themselves. Leaders both in public and private spheres who, you know, risk their security for the promise of making the nation and the world a better place. And the Marine Corps has statistics alone experienced moderate improvements in death by suicide and attempts. However, the number of suicidal ideations is at a steady increase. And for me, and I think for all leaders across the organization, one death by suicide is one too many. And my goal is to invite leaders like yourselves from diverse industries, functions, and provide opportunity to share their successful resiliency stories, increasing awareness and promoting resources. So it's not just the leaders within the organizations who are transparent and willing to help, willing to provide resources, but it's also using a multifaceted approach of, bringing in experts from outside the organization to be able to share their part of success stories and how their resiliency stories may, impact us positively as an organization. So I think it's both ways.
It is, and it's really a delicate thing when you think about it, because there's to be strong. I mean, we could spend hours just defining what strength looks like, right? I mean, I've got a daughter that just had a baby. I mean, there's probably nothing that could define strength any more viscerally than a woman giving birth. I mean, and then of course being a mother, it only just starts with birth, right? But this idea of being strong, and at the same time also having the capacity to be vulnerable, to be transparent about where you're coming from. So if you're in a bad place, if you're entertaining thoughts of whatever it is, whether it's suicide or just, that you're angry or you're sad or other things that are going on, it's like, how is it that you can both be strong and also be vulnerable at the same time? That's not an easy, I won't call it a balance, but let's say to harmonize those two things that seemingly are irreconcilable or opposite even. That's an interesting task. So my question to you is, do you feel like that's on the radar at this point within your branch of the military?
Yeah, let me share some of the programs that I've implemented, and hopefully that can shed some light into answering your question. So the Marine Corps Suicide Prevention Program envisions a strong and resilient Corps in which no Marine is left behind. And nested under the institutional mission and vision, my program is designed to supplement well-established policies and guidelines. Furthermore, it provides personnel with the immediate action and decision-making tools, including the process for identification, referral, access to treatment, and follow-up procedures for service members at risk of suicide. But most importantly, going back to some of the things that we discussed earlier, Adam, I emphasize the importance of leadership for early identification and intervention for stressors that detract from personal and unit readiness. So we use tools such as the Command Individual Risk and Resiliency Assessment System, enabling Marine Corps leaders to make informed and timely decisions for force preservation based on risk assessment. We also have a Force Preservation Council that meets at least once a month to synchronize and share ways to provide resources to the command for the Marines at the individual level. And finally, incorporating a multidisciplinary approach comprised of experts from different specialties. For example, from the chaplain who's providing spiritual support to licensed counselors, medical professionals to behavioral specialists. I mean, the list goes on. And the end state is to provide tailored resources for our Marines and sailors, creating a robust and safe environment, that optimizes effectiveness and mission readiness.
I'm curious, what was it that motivated you to join the Marines in the first place? And I'd love to, since this is called The Conscious Pivot, this show is about people's pivots in life, sometimes ones that we control and sometimes ones that just happen. I'd love to get a sense of both the entry point to the Marine Corps as well as some of those pivot points in your life.
Yeah, I think you can find pivot moments throughout my journey. As a first generation Korean American, I had a strong sense of justice and duty to give back to the country that, allowed my family to make it our home. By the prospect of knocking down doors and, bringing justice to the enemies of freedom and protecting the American values, I went to the Naval Academy. But during my final year, when I was volunteering at a local church, I started to consider my motivations, and through reflection, as time progressed, I realized that life that emulates unconditional love and gratitude, not justice, was my calling. And this is where you can kind of perhaps see how I successfully reinvented areas of my personal life. And then it goes back to what we talked about previously, right? Like behind every mission accomplishment and each lioness leader were subordinates who worked tirelessly and, sometimes risk lives to see the collective vision come to life. And I think it's at that point I made it my mission to care for the welfare of those Marines and sailors and the families. So I believe, recognizing and valuing the people at the heart of the organization, whether in the military or in my local communities, have helped me become a better man and a leader. So
it's yeah, I'm pausing here for my own thoughts to catch up with what I'm feeling, which is that I didn't expect that our conversation would talk about unconditional love as an example. There may be people who are listening to this or watching this and are also sort of just going, wow, am I listening to somebody who's delivering a talk about love to an audience of people that are there for that message, or am I listening to somebody who's in a leadership role within a military organization that's not often contextualized around love? So it's just so beautiful to hear that. I mean, it's because again, I think we so often are feeling or we are even programmed to feel that these things are mutually exclusive, that they're different. It's one silo for one thing and it's another silo for something else. And you're talking about more of an integration of those two things. Am I getting close to how you feel about it?
Yeah, 100%, Adam. I think it's not silos of excellence. I think they, coexist, and it's your ability to make sure that those two things are symbiotic and helping you be more resilient.
Exactly. So I'd love to just sort of get a sense of, again, how it is that this concept of resilience, I always ask people on this show to define it. So I'm going to ask you for your own personal definition of it. And we'll go from there.
Yeah. So how do I define resiliency? So it's two parts. Personally, I think it's the ability to adapt to circumstances and to overcome adversities. And I witnessed it firsthand, personified by my parents. So from the devastation of Asian financial crisis of 1997, to leaving everything behind at age 37 and immigrating to the States with, $400 in his pocket, to assimilating to the hardships of immigrant life, overcoming language barriers and cultural barriers, to sacrificing immensely to establish a foundation so the next generation, so that I can fulfill the American dream in the land of opportunity. That's one way that I saw firsthand resiliency was personified through the example of my parents. And I also had to adapt and overcome adversities on my own ways, immigrating, learning a new language, meeting new friends, attending the United States Naval Academy, which was a transformational experience in and of itself, graduating as a Marine officer and soaring through the ranks as a leader, and coping with not only my burdens, but burdens of leadership that accompanies a certain level of leadership. And Sun Tzu in Art of War, one of my favorite quotes is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. I think this adage is applicable not only in warfare, but also in how we cope with enemies of resiliency that surrounds us on a day-to-day, daily lives. And professionally, as a leader, I think resiliency is the X factor that will either make or break the individual at the intersection of life and death situation. And I think that's how important resiliency is. And we try to bring that spirit back to the program that I piloted in my current organization to really, eliminate the negative stigma and promote awareness and provide resources to service members and their families.
What do you think the negative stigma is, or what's been your experience of what that is?
I think it's the misconception of what strength means, right?
What we talked about, what we started to talk about earlier.
Right. And it's the ability to really understand yourself. And it's part of life. I think everybody faces, certain situations, but we learn to cope with those situations in both negative and positive ways. And through those experiences, we become more resilient as a result. And when you look at, the Marine Corps population in general, it's very young, right? People who are graduating from college or even high school joining, and they're experiencing this transformational development. And life is tough. And, the men and women in service learn to cope with not only the resiliency that comes from mission accomplishment, but also their personal growth as they're developing into a leader in our world. So,
indeed, you said something earlier I want to come back to, which is you talked about the enemies of resiliency, and I'd love to get a sense of not an exhaustive list, but what are the enemies of resiliency? Or some of them, let's say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think before you sleep, Adam, you reflect on your day and just spend 10 minutes of your time. And I know in your book Pivot, you talk about expressing gratitude for two to three things that you experience during the day. But I think if you spend some time thinking about your day, you will come up with the enemies of resiliency that you face on that day. So I think it's very difficult to define what the enemies of resiliency is, because I think everybody lives a different lifestyle, and everyone experiences things differently. So their enemies of resiliency can be different. So it's understanding yourself and coping with some of those uncertainties that you may face during that day. I think that's how I define enemies of resiliency.
Yes. I feel very closely aligned with with the way you just expressed it. So I'm sort of doing a little internal battle right now on this, because I think it's also important, at least from the standpoint of resilience, when I'm speaking about it to organizations and leaders, that we can look for certain things, because when we can see those things, when we can identify them, while that's not the only way that they manifest, it's sometimes easier for a leader to then be able to say, there's a sign of depletion here, there's a sign of exhaustion, there's a sign of burnout. And so, to me, recovery is so vital to how I define resilience. And this idea that, almost like, the old expression that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I've been saying just recently that an ounce of recovery is worth a pound of resilience. And that recovery, is, I guess, my question for you. I'd love to know, with everything that you've got going on in your world and all the people that you are, by virtue of your mission, now supporting, how is it that you are routinely or even ritually creating recovery zones for yourself? What does that look like in your life?
For me personally, it's a habit, right? So it's the habit that I create. It's a routine that I have. So when I wake up, I go straight into meditation. So I drink a glass of water and I meditate. Don't ask me which YouTube videos I watch as I'm meditating, but it's It's actually in Korean, and they do a phenomenal job. It's about 5 to 10 minutes each morning, and I meditate and I try to not think about work or what's ahead of me, but try to think about bringing peace in my body. Um, and I do a quiet time where I read the Bible and I kind of go back to my values rooted in Christian values. I think that kind of helps me uh, ignite my fuel to start the day. And throughout the day, I think as cliche as this may sound, it's the Marines and the sailors that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. So I don't look at it as a job. I don't look at it as a task. I don't look at it as a mission to care for the Marines. It's part of me. It's part of who I am. And I think I don't look at it as a burden of leadership, but rather what can I do to ensure that their lives are better today. So it's the positive thinking and positive reinforcement in the mind, body, and spirit. I think that gets me going. And at the end of the day, I mean, you mentioned it perfectly in your book Pivot. Like, think about 2 to 3 things that you're thankful for. And I think I find more than 2 to 3 things that I'm thankful for every day. Right? I'm alive. I'm healthy. I'm living. I was able to contribute to the community and something greater than myself. So I think it's the unconditional love and also the gratitude that gets me recover and gets me going.
Yeah. You and I start our days in a very similar way. The glass of water, sitting to meditate, reading the Bible. I sometimes will read the Bible or just, randomly pick something there, or as is often the case, I have a book of daily readings that are about other things, but they're usually tied to some statement or some story from Old or New Testament. And it's very grounding. I shared this with folks before. I'll quickly mention it now. Is I have a code of conduct, which is all about how I want to experience myself throughout the day. We set out every day. If we're lucky, we wake up, we get to start a new day. We're on our path. I think there's a lot of folks that are allowing the day to sort of be in control. I'm not so much of a control freak as I used to be when I was a lawyer. I guess maybe still am a bit. But I decided some years ago, about 12 years ago, that if I wanted to have a certain feeling about my life, that I could engineer that or at least plan for it. And if I was going to do that, when would be the time to do it? Would I do it at noon? Would I do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm like out of patience and I'm ready, just ready to lose it? When I was a lawyer, I would lose it.
Right.
3, 4 o'clock, I get angry. I'd start, writing nasty letters to people. And I mean, it was a good outlet for my anger back then. Now I just stomp my feet and cry like a baby. But but if I start my day and say, what I want to experience today is the following, then I become the conscious creator of that experience, as opposed to just letting life sort of dictate what happens or how I react to it. Because I think life is a reflex of mental states. So that grounding at the beginning of the day, I think if there's anything I could ever suggest to anybody to do on a routine basis, ritual basis, it would be what you described. So my question to you then, after that long ramble, is, do you find that certain times of the day you've gotten ungrounded, like that the work that you did at the beginning is not holding, like that it's just not holding together or something like that? You find that ever happens for you? And what do you do about it?
Adam, I would say almost every day. Right.
Oh, good. It's not just me.
Right. So, dual hatting, doing the job of 2 officers, being a communications officer and also leading the largest company, most diversified company, there's going to be things that happen left and right, whether it's, mission related, personnel related, things happen. And I think it's good to be in a positive mental state, readying yourself for the battles ahead of you during the day. But it's also putting yourself in a conscious mindset that things can alter. And when it does, when things alter, you're able to adapt and overcome. And I think that is where I have, where I gain value when it comes to resiliency, right? So
it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and something just happens, it's unexpected, or, you get an email or a phone call or whatever it might be. That just kind of catches you a little unawares. Do you have a process or something that you do in that moment that helps you to get back to that place where, as you said earlier, you are a life that emulates unconditional love in that moment?
I don't think there's a lot of things that I experience, and I learned to cope with a lot of situations. So oftentimes, a lot of the situations that I face, thankfully, is not new. So I'm able to cope with a lot of those new circumstances that arrive. But to answer your question directly, I don't think I find myself frustrated at the moment, at the heat of the moment. But as soon as I put out the fire, or as soon as I accomplish that specific task that I had to accomplish, I definitely do a reflection point of how I could have done better. But I do that internally. But when it comes to impacting mission, impacting Marines and their lives, I think bringing the staff together, because it's not just me who's feeling the pressure in an organization that's that big and running missions left and right. I think it impacts not only myself, but my staff and people who I work with. So bringing the staff together, doing an after action report, and figuring out how we can better cope with the situation, similar situations, is something that I do. And I think it's beneficial for me personally. So
Right.
Reflecting on the situation and learning from the experience.
We use something called just a typical feedback loop, I suppose, that involves three sort of statements or questions, really, which is, sort of a assessment of what's worked or what's worked for me, what didn't work for me, what could be done differently. That kind of a feedback loop is something that as our much smaller company than the one that you're working in, the feedback is so important because it's so easy to just sort of internalize things, and then when there is kind of a blow up or a something that's more at a more heightened state of emotion, even, it's usually not because of the thing that just happened. It's because there was all this stuff that had just sort of built up over time and led to that. Now, there's a need for a release or something. I'm curious if there are times when you find that the feedback is actually counterproductive. Do you feel like, as a leader, that, say, feedback can have the opposite effect? Is it sometimes not something that you want to engage in, or you postpone even?
As a leader, I think feedback is critical to ensuring the organizational success, and feedback can be both positive and negative. But personally, as a leader, I think you have to be able to take negative feedback a lot better than positive feedback, because when a situation comes up and you, as a leader in charge of an organization, take negative feedback in a disappointing manner, or when you abruptly go emotional about the situation, that's going to prevent future iterations of feedback. And sometimes I learned that negative feedback is what's most useful to progressing the organization to positive ways, right? So I think both are valuable and both can contribute positively. But the most important thing, you as a leader, you have to understand how you receive feedback and how you respond to those feedback. And I've learned that, responding, to negative feedback is equally important to responding to positive feedback.
How important is failure?
To me, extremely important, and to a certain degree. So, countless nights that I spent in emergency rooms as a platoon commander, referring Marines to, access to treatment, follow-up procedures, were some of the most challenging, but also most rewarding experiences of my military service. And I say that because it was a failure, right? But it was a positive failure. It was a success story at the end where, no Marine, sailor, or their family members lost lives, right? So to me, failure is very important, but the level of failure is also important as a leader to assess and understand.
Yeah. I just as we wrap up our conversation, which I feel like this is such a timely, it couldn't be any more timely with everything that's been going on in the sort of on a global basis, that so many people have been so isolated, and loneliness and anxiety and depression are much more on the radar as conversations people are having and things that people are aware of. And that being something that you've been involved in helping servicemen and women deal with for a while now. I'm just curious what was the inspiration for you to get involved in that? Was there some catalytic type event that you were witness to that just you said, I have to step in and do something here? Or
I think, to answer your first question about the pandemic, I think it's a profound understatement to say that the pandemic had an impact. I think it had a significant impact on not only the Marines and service members that I serve with, but also the world as a whole, right? But in the Marine Corps, we have coping mechanisms, and we have gyms that are open. We come to work, we use our, precautions, but life is almost normal, right? Missions are still going on. There's still things that we have to do as Marines and as service members. To answer your question on what motivated me to, pilot the resiliency program in my organization and to make an impact, I think it's deeper than my life. And, in my adolescence, immigrating at age 10, my parents courageously assimilated to the hardships of immigrant life, sacrificing for the next generation for my success, demonstrating unconditional love. Like my parents inculcated that true success is not defined by the wealth of knowledge, recognition, societal position, nor money. True success is the ability to provide genuine care and the heart to love and influence those around you in meaningful and positive ways.
yes.
And consequently, I spent my 20s incorporating the life lessons from my parents and values rooted in faith, of unconditional love and gratitude, placing the good of others before my own. And it's not to toot my own horn or place myself on the pedestal, but in the military and in communities, wherever service called, right? Loving what I do, I rose through the ranks, holding a current position. And I think I try to use that influence and power to make a positive change for the Marines. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was through the resiliency program. But it's not just a resiliency program that leaders kind of provide positive influence to the Marines. There are different programs within the Marine Corps, within the service, that provide care, support, resources to the Marines and service members. So I'm extremely thankful for the opportunity that the command is giving me for me to be able to pilot the program and to make a positive impact. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
it does. I mean, it's yeah, as you said, there's no kind of way to encapsulate what the world has experienced and is still dealing with. And more than anything, I think just that the conversation is happening, that this is something people are discussing openly is a really big deal. I'm wearing this shirt for a reason today. It says "Got Your Back" for those of you that are maybe watching this on YouTube. But it's a principle in the Marines, certainly, that, as you said, nobody's left, no soldiers left in the field, nobody's left behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have each other's backs. It's just, what does the principle mean, really? And I think that's an evolving conversation and question. But I'll ask you as we are winding things down, what does this term, got your back, or having somebody's back, what does that look like and mean to you?
I think it's a constant reminder that I'm in a position of authority and I'm in a position of leadership, and how I use my influence and power to affect positive change is really dependent on me. And as leaders like myself in an organization, going back to the quote that I shared, it's the culture that we set, right? So it's the culture of getting your back. It's the culture of looking out for each other, not at the top, management level, or at the bottom, but in every single organization and the hierarchy within that organization. So I think it's a collective effort, and I think it's a holistic approach to human life, right? Caring for one another, being passionate for other people's success, and be willing to sacrifice yourself so that others may benefit from your sacrifice. I think that is the spirit of your T-shirt, getting your back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough, Captain Lim, for your service, for what you're bringing to the service, not just for the service, but the way you are innovating and adding value to a service that has been around for a very long time. And I know there's a lot of people just like you that want to see things be improved in every way that it's possible. And at the root, that people that have given of themselves so selflessly, but have given their service, that they are truly cared for. And that is not that's not an easy task under, in the best of circumstances. So thank you so much for that work.
No, thank you. And thank you for, providing me the opportunity to share my story and, hopefully impact the audience in positive ways. So thank you for your time and your support, Adam.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I know the answer already from me, but I want to ask it. Daniel, do you love your life?
100%, absolutely, unconditionally.
Yeah, awesome. Well, everybody, if you've enjoyed this episode, be so thrilled if you would share it with someone, and someone that may be struggling at this moment, or just somebody that would benefit from it, somebody that has influence that can share it with other people. We can't thank the folks in service enough for the work that they do and for their sacrifices and resiliency. This is a pilot program, but I'm sure it's just the beginning, really, because it's so important that we recognize that we all go through many ups and downs in our lives and in our careers, and in a single day. It's a roller coaster, but resiliency really is a key ingredient to being able to leverage all of that uncertainty, all of that adversity, even, so that we grow, and as we grow, our world grows. With that, again, thank you so much. Feel free to subscribe, leave a comment. You go to adammarkel.com/podcast to leave a comment. We'd love to find out what you thought about the episode as well. And I'll just say ciao for now. And again, hoping that today you find a good reason to love your life no matter what. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you now have the tools and greater insights to navigate your own pivot. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at adammarkel.com/podcasts. For more tips, strategies, and support as you consciously pivot into a new business and lifestyle you love, join our Pivot community on Facebook at pivotfb.com.